All right, so I'm super thrilled about this one because we've got someone here with us who has lived through the experience of being a high-performing individual, who've been part of high-performing teams, and who is now on a journey to build something that is fulfilling for herself, but also be a high-performing rock star in that area. McKenna, welcome. You've been a great team member. We've had
Thank
the
you.
opportunity to work together in some ways in the past. It's super exciting to have you and learn about your journey and what you're building towards. But I have a question to start us off with. Is AI going to replace SDRs?
Thank you for having me. And no, I do not believe AI will replace SDRs. I can speak to this from a recruiter lens. I can also speak to this as an entrepreneur myself, where I have actually taken demos for said SDR AI agents. So I can elaborate on why I say no, but to put it simply, no, I do not believe that AI will replace SDRs.
I actually agree with you, McKenna. Um, I think there's a lot of people out there who are really scared of that, but every time I lean into AI, I use it for my job every day. I see the SDR team at my company using AI. I think that the highest performing SDRs are the ones actually leaning into AI rather than ignoring it. So if you can elaborate why you agree with the no statement, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start from my perspective as a business owner, where business development is a huge part of my business. And for myself, I'm wearing so many hats. Naturally, I was curious to see what are these SDR agents all about. I did a few demos with a few different companies. And for myself and my brand, being a boutique recruitment agency, for example, having a very tailored, high touch, personalized, white glove experience, I feel as though I need a human SDR in place to deliver that. At
Mhm.
the end of the day, I personally felt an AI SDR would be spammy. It might not be personalized, high touch. So, as an entrepreneur and founder, it's something that I felt like didn't align with my brand. But on the flip side, what I'm seeing across software companies, technology companies who are hiring SDRs, it's at the end of the day, it's not the best one experience for your prospect or for your client. Think about it today when we call in somewhere and you can't talk to a human, it's really frustrating.
So frustrating.
It's just like you're constantly pounding zero to try to get to an operator. You want to talk to a human. So at the end of the day, I believe that AI can make you work much more efficiently. Perhaps an SDR team might be more lean now or in the future, but I do not believe that SDRs will be fully replaced due to the fact that for a brand, you need to have humans behind it. It provides a better experience for everyone. It makes you more reputable. It gives you more control over your brand and also the ability to really coach and mentor people and allow them to like build up your business. That's really important. You need that team. So there's so many reasons, but those are a few reasons why I believe that SDRs, BDRs will always be needed.
I agree. And that's exactly why we had you on today's podcast. So, for those of you listening, welcome to our episode of GTM Bantercast. I can't wait to get into it. So, McKenna, I have to ask because I know that you were super high performing in previous roles. Now you're a business owner. What is something since, AI has become so prominent in the business world that you've noticed has changed in the way that top performers are going about their day to day? I've noticed some things on my end. Like I mentioned earlier, I think that top performers are really leaning into AI, but from your own personal experience, you've kind of seen it all. You've experienced a lot of different things. I'd love to hear your take on how, high performing sales reps can continue to do really well while leveraging AI.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what's really interesting is if I was starting my career today and I had the resources and tools that people have now, it's just wild. It's never been easier to become an expert at what you do
Yeah.
without really having to rely on anyone else but yourself. So if you're a self-starter, the world's your oyster.
Mhm.
So, in a few areas, like let's take at most organizations, at the very least, you can have access to a ChatGPT or a Claude. I know some organizations don't allow you to use those tools. And if that's the case, you probably have something internally that you're using, like a Copilot or a Gemini through the business. Either way, you have access to something.
Mhm.
And if you do have access to something, or even if you don't, it's worth that personal investment to use it. So, to answer your question, what would a successful top performing person do today leveraging AI? You can think on, start with like an accounting executive. What I would do is I would have a project in Claude for every one of my deals. Within those projects, I would include all of my call transcripts, my work back plans, my account plans, everything to do with that deal, communication. You can export your Slack messages into it. And the reason being is there's tools like Notebook LM where you access that single source of truth in the repository. But by creating a project in Claude, for example, you're also able to ask it questions. For example, based on our last conversation that was on July 10th, what has changed in the business strategically that might impact my call coming up, where we're going to be discussing how this software will provide value for the team. It's always in live and real time. On the BDR side, you can do the same. You can create a project in Claude. You can also create projects now in ChatGPT or Gemini. I'm using Claude as an example because I'm a big Claude user. But you can have all of your accounts in a project, and the same thing goes. Everyone for the most part is using something for your email sequencing, but
Yeah.
that's not enough. By having projects in there, you can always ensure that your messaging is the most recent and up to date in that follow up. You can also really do more high touch, higher volume now than before. Like before, when I was an SDR, I would put 1,000 companies in one sequence and it's all getting the same messaging. But now you can be much more personalized at a much higher volume because you don't have to manually write each email and doing all of your research and pulling from different sources. You can get Claude or ChatGPT, whatever it might be, to really personalize every outreach. And then also on the leadership side, a lot of leaders are using AI for pipeline or forecasting or asking solutions like Gong, why is this deal going quiet? But I think a really strategic and out of the box way to use AI is, again, they can create a project for every member on their team. You can record your notes based on giving feedback and coaching and how they approach their deals and provide customized coaching to your team to really ensure that they're being elevated and you're not just coaching 8 different people the same way, but based on their personalities. So I think that there's a lot of ways to just make you work more efficiently and
Mhm.
strategically by leveraging AI to be a top performer.
Mhm. And it's funny because when you mentioned the personalization aspect of how you're able to do so much more outreach, I think people think with AI it's less personal because everything's so automated. But I actually think with AI, there's way more opportunity to do like a deep dive, find out information that just based on, the way it was a few years ago when you just go on Google, you look at the company website, you go on LinkedIn, and you try to pull information. AI can dive deeper much quicker and it just helps with that personal approach. So I agree with you, and that's a good tip for people of all different levels to be able to use AI. I actually, my favorite quote right now is, I don't know if it's a quote, but I've been hearing people say it a lot, is that um, learning how to prompt is the best new prospecting skill. And it's so
Yeah.
true because if you can learn how to coach and train your Claude or whatever agent you're using, that is such an invaluable asset in sales nowadays. And so, if you want to be good at prospecting at whatever level you are, or even just pulling strong reports, learn how to prompt because it will save you a ton of time. And I know some people are scared of it, but I think if you can learn how to use the tool effectively, it's just going to be nothing but beneficial. You said it yourself. If you were just starting in sales, it's wild the amount of ways that you can go about using AI. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Murtaza, I saw you come off your.
Yeah. So, McKenna, I wanted to ask a question. and this probably ties in a little bit with where you're at in your endeavors now. You said something about some organizations don't permit their teams to use some of these tools. What does that say about that
Yeah.
organization?
So, to answer that question, there are organizations, large enterprises. Let's take a big bank here in Canada. They don't permit their employees to use a chat GPT for security reasons, where they don't want them to be, importing confidential bank information, for an example, into the chat GPT. So instead of chat GPT, they offer something internally, their own AI agent, like perhaps if they're partnered with Microsoft to Copilot. So that's what I was referring to, is for security reasons, that they might not let you have certain specific AI agents. And that's actually an issue that I'm coming across a lot, and is like vendor sprawl, where there's a lot of organizations popping up where they solve for that issue, where IT and security, they don't know what their employees are leveraging from an AI perspective. So there's actually softwares being developed to detect that. So that way they know, like, hey, McKenna's not supposed to be uploading confidential information in ChatGPT, but she is. That's also something for people to be aware of, because I do think when it comes to compliance and security, that is a concern for some organizations. That said, Murtaza, if they're not allowing their employees to leverage AI because they're anti-AI, it's a whole other discussion. And that's probably an organization I would caution applying for. Um, or they'd be a great opportunity for an AI advisory firm to provide a lot of coaching, to get them on board and honestly get them into 2026, because it's only the beginning.
Yeah, do you often come across organizations that are blocking usage of AI on non-security reasons, or is it mostly security, mostly large size organizations?
At this point, no. Now it's almost a requirement that their employees, or the people that I'm interviewing, they have to be literate in AI. And it's changing constantly. It wasn't that long ago when I was selling software myself and I'd bring up AI and they would be cautious, like, oh, we're not quite there yet. But now it's like, if you're not adopting it, you're falling behind. And that actually leads me to, something I'm seeing a lot when I'm interviewing is I ask, like, how do you leverage AI in your day to day? And if someone just tells me they're using it to create email sequences or edit emails, that's simply not enough. People and organizations are looking for talent to be able to bring best practices and out of the box solutions, such as like building out workflows, to the organization. So, no, I'm not seeing organizations being anti AI outside of security reasons, fortunately. That said, I am very narrowed in and niched on working specifically with companies who are looking for revenue and software talent. So that's kind of, they're in that world. But to answer your question, I'm not seeing it.
So that actually is a good segue. And fill us in on your journey. How'd you get to be here? How'd you make that tough call of being a kick butt sales executive, winning president clubs, making good coin, going from there to be like, you know what? I want to build something on my own. Forget all the fancy corporate life.
That's a good question. So I don't know how many podcasts you might listen to, probably a lot as podcast host yourself, but I love entrepreneur podcasts. Anyone comes on, and I've noticed a theme that a lot of people who start businesses typically started really young. Like there's having like lemonade stands. And that was me to a T. Me and my cousins or my siblings, we'd be selling like chestnuts at our cottage that we just like collect in our backyards and like selling them, saying that like people could like cook and eat them. I don't know, but like from a young age, I was just loving that. Um, you know, I got into the Airbnb game. My husband and I were fortunate enough to buy a condo in Toronto. We have an investment property outside of the city. We are Airbnb-ing the two. I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. And how I got to where I am today is that I graduated from university. I always thought I'd go to law school. I had a passion to pursue family law. I decided to take a year off to make money. I fell into a sales role. And at this sales role, I had a friend there and she was like, McKenna, we have to get into software sales. Like that is the future. Mind you, this is in 2015. The tech landscape has changed so much. At that time, there was like LinkedIn, Salesforce, and a few random startups, which like sounds like I'm aging myself, even though 11 years ago isn't that long ago, but in the tech world, it really is. And I got in at a small startup and it was acquired while I was there. And that's when I was like, no, this is it for me. I just fell in love with the game. Like honestly, I think of sales as like a treasure hunt. As a BDR, I loved being a BDR and just like ripping dials, LinkedIn, emails, because to me it was like a treasure hunt. Like if you convert, you're literally finding treasure, you're getting money. So I just found it so motivating. And then I ended up at, another company where we all met and I was there for almost 8 years. And that was some of the best experiences of my life. I'm so fortunate to have been there. But again, I always had that itch. And I was just at this place in my personal life where I was like, you know what? If I don't make a change now, it will only become harder to bite the bullet. So I went to another company. And then pretty early on, I had this idea for VL Talent Collective, where between my husband and I, we have over 20 years of software sales experience. And we were like, we should do something with this. And then I was like, what about recruiting? Because we have a huge network between the two of us across North America. In addition to that, we've both been President's Club top performers, and we know what makes someone succeed versus doesn't. Because just because you've been really successful elsewhere doesn't mean you're going to be really successful somewhere else. And it's being able to identify that within someone, but also the leadership and ensuring there's that match. And that's really how this came to be. So honestly, crazy. Like there's been so many things I've done in my life where I'm like, that was insane. Like, was I okay? But they've all helped me get to where I am now. And I always like to recognize starting a business. I do come from a place of privilege where I am married and, my husband can pay our bills every month and I could take on that risk. Whereas not everyone has that luxury. So, that's also helped me have the confidence to be able to do something like this.
I just wanted to know how has it been? I know it's a fairly new adjustment and change, and I'd love to hear how it's going.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. Honestly, it's been going really well. And, I'm about 6 months in. I've had 4 clients, which I'm really proud of, and everyone's been so, so amazing. And I think my biggest takeaway, and I actually made a post on this on LinkedIn early days, and it's very relevant to your podcast, is that the skills I acquired as an SDR, BDR are the most transferable skills I have. It's just even being an account executive and being able to run deals at the caliber that I did, it makes the transition to be an entrepreneur, I don't want to say easy, because every day it feels like I'm climbing a mountain blindfolded, but it makes me feel very capable and confident to do it. So that's how I would describe it. It's been a journey. Some moments I'm like, I am going to be like the next huge sales recruitment agency. And other days I'm like, what am I doing here? But whenever I feel that way, something changes and I just keep on going, I just keep on showing up every day. And that's what it is in sales. Like being a BDR, an AE, a leader, it's such a roller coaster and you develop such resilience. And again, that transfers over really well to being an entrepreneur and starting a business. But it's going well. And yeah, I'm really excited and optimistic for the future.
That comment you made about climbing a mountain blindfolded every day, I resonate with that so much because there's there's so much anxiety sometimes. Like things may be going really great, but at some point you start thinking about what's 3 months down the road, and you're like, I don't know, right? And
I don't even go there.
then,
It's funny you say that, Murtaza, because using Claude and speaking of AI, I actually created. So right now, I'm really focusing on brand awareness and visibility. So, doing things like the podcast today, getting on a newsletter, being in thought leaders' comments, just having more brand visibility for VL Talent Collective. So I actually used Claude, and together we came up with a 90-day action plan where every day I have 5 things that I do and I have to check that box. So that way I'm always ensuring I'm moving forward. Because again, it's just you wake up every day and you just have to go for it. And similar to sales. And actually, Savannah, you said something earlier that I wanted to comment on when you mentioned with AI that can come across as almost less personal. And I
Yeah.
wanted to circle back to this because when I was an AE last, my SDR made a typo and sent out an email. And he was so apologetic. He was like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, no, don't worry. I'm like, the typo shows that you're human. It shows that you actually took the time and you wrote this. So I just wanted to circle back to that as well, because when you're using AI and it's helping you with emails, um, I would say like take the time to still make it your own, like remove those dashes. Those dashes are a clear giveaway, just like put it in your own voice. Don't let it take away your personality, because so much about being successful in sales, and going back to why I don't think AI will replace SDRs or BDRs, is because people do buy from people.
All day.
And getting together in person, like this morning, I went to a prospective client's office and they said, we can do it virtually, but also if you're available, come into the office. And I was like, absolutely. Any chance you can get in person and build that relationship goes such a long way. And an SDR agent absolutely cannot do that.
No. And I like that you brought that back up, because I've also made that mistake in previous roles. You send a typo, or you miss a word completely, or it's not the proper punctuation, but it does make it human. Just like when you call someone and you sneeze. This happened to me a couple months ago. I sneezed on the call and the person laughed for a few minutes because they thought it was so funny. And I'm like, listen, I'm only human. I'm calling you, like, I'm just doing my job and I'm a human being on the other line. And I ended up having a great conversation with this prospect because I think that built rapport. We had a good laugh. They blessed me. I had to apologize to them, and we moved on from that. But I think that those small errors are what make us human. And when you say people buy from people, it's totally true.
Yeah.
Just like earlier when you said like AI bots are frustrating on the phone, I get asked all the time now, is this AI? Are you AI? And I'm like, no, like, what do I need to do to prove it to you? And maybe it's just, a woman's voice. I hear it within my company all the time. The men never get asked, but it's very frequent amongst the women that people think that we're AI bots just based on the way that we sound over the phone. And so we, like, the bar for human connection and a real human salesperson has gone way up, and we have to kind of fight for that to prove to them that, like, we're real, we're human, and this is why you should buy from me, rather than I'm using a bot to sell.
For sure. And you bring up such an interesting point that I'm seeing a lot as an entrepreneur, as well as a recruiter, where AI has gone so far now that everyone's kind of scared, like what's real, what's not. On the recruitment side, for example, I do all of my screenings with the camera on, and I
Yeah.
am looking for signs that it's not an avatar. Like, how crazy is that? And then on the flip side, as an entrepreneur, I am so paranoid that I'm going to get scammed, or if someone reach out to me, they're not real.
Yeah.
And being able to validate that you are a real human goes such a long way.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like, humans need connection. But yeah, it's crazy, and I feel you there. I actually had a call earlier today where I was invited to a call through, I'm part of Tech TO, and we connected and we set up a call, but instead someone else showed up to the call and it wasn't who I was expecting. And the entire time I was asking all these questions, not trying to be rude, but also trying to qualify, like, are you real? Like, is this like legit? So, that's a whole other element that salespeople, especially SDRs and BDRs on the front lines, need to navigate.
I have to ask, what do you look for to make sure when you're doing your first screening? What are the signs that you're looking for to see if this person's real or not?
So first and foremost, if they won't turn on their video, the call's over. Like, that's just like a hard stop for me.
Okay.
2, I would prefer for their backgrounds not to be blurred, so I can see what their backgrounds look like, as well as their movements. Like, if they're moving around, that you can kind of tell. And then it's that, like, so it's like those things that you can kind of pick up on. But again, it's this delicate balance of not wanting to be rude. That's like the human condition of not wanting to accuse someone of being an avatar. So I don't
Right.
even really know what an avatar is, but it's about just like, I'm like always looking for news articles. I'm online. I'm doing research for ways to, one, be aware of how the technology is evolving, and two, how to prevent and
Mhm.
look for it. So really it comes down to myself and just ensuring that I'm self-educating and aware of what's happening with AI and ways to detect it. Because what I'm doing today may not work tomorrow. You know, like these AI avatars might figure out, oh, they've picked up if we ask them to move, and then just learns from there.
Yeah.
So it's an ever evolving process, but those are some things that I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how it's so prominent, not only in a business world, but also our personal lives. I was in Chicago a few weeks ago and I left my credit card at a restaurant. So I called the restaurant to, arrange to pick up my card. And when I phoned, the woman, I mean, spoke perfectly, but it is creepy. Sometimes you don't know, and
Yeah.
sometimes you get scared. And when you're handling something like a credit card, you want to make sure
Mhm.
that, everything's being sorted out. And I remember asking the lady, I was sitting having a coffee and I said to her on the phone, are you AI? I'm sorry to ask. And people do it to me at work all the time. And now I did it to her. I'm like, I need to know, are you a real person? And she chuckled on the phone. She's like, I am. She's like, I'll step outside. I'll tell you what it looks like outside right now. So she cleared that up for me. But it is funny how we have to look for
Yeah,
the signs not only at work, but now in our personal lives, and things are ever changing. And so a
exactly.
year ago, an AI hostess to make a dinner reservation was not a thing. And now, when you call a restaurant to make a dinner reservation, 90% of the time, it's not a human hostess anymore.
Yeah. It's so crazy.
They may have to do stuff like the old joke for undercover cops. If they ask you, "Are you a cop?" you have to declare, which is not true, by the way. But they may do that like mandatory for AI. That if somebody asks, "Are you AI?" you have to respond, and yes, if you really are AI.
There has to be some regulation. There has to be. Like even on social media, like Instagram, for example, there's so many like AI influencers now. And it's like,
Yeah.
and I think that they're going towards they have to identify that they're AI. I think I saw something about that. But yeah, Murtaza, I wouldn't be surprised if there's eventually gonna be like some sort of law. I would I don't know. I guess it depends on like yeah, I don't know. That's crazy.
I also have a question, McKenna. Earlier in the call, you mentioned you yourself have sat on demos. You've seen what these AI SDR or AI sales reps look like. That's something
Mhm.
I admittedly have not dug into yet. I have not had the privilege of getting to see what that looks like, but I do speak to people all the time who mention, they're cutting down on their sales team to get AI SDRs instead. So, I mean, this is a multi-part question, but like, what do these AI agents even look like? Because I'm so curious to know, when they say it's an AI SDR, does the AI bot have a name? What does that actually look like? And then
Mhm.
B, do you think that the companies that are doing layoffs to get rid of human SDRs, maybe to cut costs, whatever it is, to implement AI bots, do you think, like, where do you think that's going to go for these companies?
Yeah, good questions. So for the first question, what did it look like? Honestly, I was so underwhelmed. I was like, essentially, there's an interface, and you provided a prompt of what your ICP, so your ideal customer profile, like who you're prospecting into, what type of industry, what size of an account. You tell it who you want it to book meetings with. Then
Okay.
you prompt it out, and then essentially it might give you 100 examples, and then you would identify like this looks good, this looks good, this looks good. So you're essentially educating the model and the agent, and then it goes out and it sends emails on your behalf. So as part of this, you have to have a bunch of different email emails set up for like spam purposes. And then it's just emailing these people based on how you have trained the agent. So that's what I looked at just from an emailing perspective. I haven't seen any calling agents. Um, but it almost looked like you just kind of like set it up and it runs in the background. And again, for me, that's not what my business is about. I want to be able to be seen to known as a premium, exclusive brand and business where I handpick the people that I work with. And we actually have that partnership where I want to be an extension to your team. I don't just want to spam people because that's the easy way, and sometimes the easy way isn't the best way. And for your second question, the layoffs.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that for the layoffs, I believe that the workforce will become smaller. So, for example, before you might hire 10 SDRs, but now you might only need 5. And the
Right.
reason being is because everything's just so much more efficient. You're writing emails faster. You can make dials faster. You can just do things more efficiently.
Mhm.
Like before, I remember as an account executive, if I was in a really competitive deal, I could spend like 2 hours on an email, just like pulling references and pulling research, going back to call recordings, re listening to things. This is before like transcripts, even. And now it's just so much more automated. So I do, if anyone has said that they have laid off to implement AI agents instead, I think they're going to realize pretty quickly that that's not a way to scale at this point in time.
Mhm.
Based on all the reasons that we've already discussed, I do believe that AI can make teams more lean and as a result have layoffs, but that also reveals a really great opportunity for people to have a competitive edge. Like it's never been easier to have a competitive edge because I speak to people all the time, and the people who stand out nowadays, it's pretty obvious. You don't have to have a crazy resume. You don't have to have an impressive education. But if you come across as like well educated and smart and hardworking, like that really sets yourself apart. Because with AI, people can also become really lazy and unmotivated because they can automate so much. So if you can automate and work hard, that makes you like such a threat and a weapon in the workforce. And it's a really great opportunity for those people. So I would say that as well.
That's a great segue to something that was in my mind, which is what exactly are you noticing in terms of trend of the modern GTM team that's coming together? Because you're hearing requests from different companies who are like, find us this kind of a person, right, or that kind of an individual. So what's that team looking like to you? Like, and a complementary part to that is how is it different from what we've been used to?
So, Murtaza, to answer your question, what I am seeing across the go-to market team are a few things. I just recently finished a BDR search. It took 4 weeks from the kickoff to the signed contract. And what this person was looking for is, it goes back to what I just said. They wanted someone who was very efficient with AI, but again, outside of the box. They wanted this BDR to bring about how can you help architect how the business development team runs. And we're not talking just cold emails, but like what type of strategy can you bring to the team, but then also wanting to share that with people. And as much as we talk about AI, again, going back to humans, something that humans offer that AI never would is that this person looking for this BDR, they wanted someone who's a team player. Like not only do you have these best practices, but you want to share them with your team as well as your organization. You also need people who are just bought in and motivated. We're all in sales, or I was in sales, because you want to make money. And something about having a human where if they don't show up and close deals or book meetings, they might not be able to pay their rent. An AI agent doesn't have that urgency, but a human does. They need to send their kids to summer camp. They have to pay for daycare. Like that's what human motivation brings. And that's what companies are still looking for. So I think whether you're a BDR on the account executive piece, it's all the same. A sales leader, as much as they want you to be able to use systems and use tools and bring these best practices to the organization, above anything else, and that what something has not changed in terms of requirement, is finding that A player, finding that person who wants to win, wants to make money, be part of the team and add to the culture. That's why everyone's looking for. That's what they're building teams. But those characteristics are becoming perhaps few and far between because as a result, like I said, people have now been, it's never been easier. And when things are easy, it's easy to be a little lazy, for lack of a better word.
That's such a good point you bring up, because one of my big complaints with a lot of high growth companies that came out of that COVID high growth period was that
Hmm.
their salespeople had become very lazy because we were in a high demand situation. So the salespeople
Hmm.
were just like taking orders. And
Yeah.
I'll date myself here. I started selling in North America in early 2000s, close to the
Hmm.
market crash time. And the way you sold at that time was like pure, hardcore sales. So
Yeah.
with every evolution and change of industry and change of economics, change of technology, there are skill sets that are lost, but people who retain that skill
Yeah.
set, to your point, are the ones who continue to outshine the rest.
I totally agree. And I think one of those skill sets is being in person. And let's be honest, working remote or hybrid, amazing for your personal life, for flexibility. I love it. But also as someone who started their career from, I graduated in 2015, COVID happened in 2020. Um, Being in person or even doing client on-sites, for example, meetings, I feel like that is few and far between for the workforce who's newer on the workforce since the pandemic. And that is a skill that is somewhat being lost. That said, I do feel as though some of the more, established organizations who were around pre-COVID are really drilling that back in. We're seeing, especially in the States, people are in office now, like 5 days a week. It's a little different in Canada. The work culture in the States is definitely a little different. Um, but you know what? I don't have an opinion on remote, hybrid, or in person. I think I only bring that up because I feel like one of the skills that is being lost is, the confidence and ability to show up in person and be comfortable and not nervous. And that makes a big difference in a sales role.
Do you see more people doing in-person interviews nowadays?
Yeah, I'm seeing that as well. And that works really well for, again, like if you're hiring within territory, of course, if it's a remote role. But, I also had a client recently and I didn't assist them on this search. It was for another role, but they flew someone in for their final interview. And I also think that kind of goes back to the rise of AI is, listen, like everyone's going to be using AI to prepare for interviews. Like that goes without saying. And honestly, you should. But on the flip side, getting together in person, you can't fake anything. You show up authentically. And at the end of the day, like that should be a benefit to you. Like that should be a win. Like everyone are unique, great people. Like go out and show that off and like don't hide behind your avatar.
I love that you mentioned that because I feel like this is a hot take from me. Just being in the generation that I'm in, I did university through COVID. When I was graduating high school, COVID hit. So I was online for a long time and I love remote work. I really do. But when it comes to interviews, I love an in-person interview. I just think, like you said, you show up better, you show up way more authentically, and it's very hard to fake it when you're face to face with someone. It's also easier for them to catch your vibe, right? So
Yeah.
actually my very first interview out of university was virtually, and I remember being so nervous. And I said to my parents afterwards, I said, if that had been in person, I think it would have gone so much better because, I said some jokes that just didn't hit the way they should have hit because it was virtually and they probably don't
Yeah.
know me as well as other people do. So it's hard for them to understand like my vibe. And I think that
Mm.
being able to do an interview like that, that's a first and lasting impression. And they say like the first time you meet someone, like that impression is going to kind of stick with you forever. And so I love an in-person interview. I think it's a great way. And maybe that's just because I'm confident and I love to interact with people face to face. But to me, I'm happy to work remote, but I'd love that first interaction to be face to face. And I think that other people would benefit from that too, because it just kind of lifts that barrier of, faking it or reading off of a chat GPT during your interview and just being fully present in the moment, which I feel like we're lacking a lot of nowadays.
For sure. And you bring up a good point and like let it be known. I work from home. I'm with my dog. I'm thriving. But that said, and I've made it clear, I love getting in person. And I also think that a core trait to a successful salesperson, I salesperson as an umbrella, that could be partnerships, account management, BDR, AE, whatever that might be, your client facing. I think if you everyone's nervous to do something in person for the first time, or but nerves is good because usually that's just adrenaline, it's excitement, it brings your energy up. But if you feel as though like you can't do these things in person, it's also something to look out for in a sales role because typically if you're hiring someone, personality goes a long way and confidence like brings you so far. Like for me, I've never been that technical, but I've always been super
Mhm.
confident, So I think that's also something to look out for is that if you're feeling like you just cannot handle in person interaction, nothing wrong with that, but maybe sales might be challenging for you. And that's a good way to figure it out earlier by getting that exposure. Whereas, if you're not in a client facing role and doing something in person or in person interview is intimidating, no problem, But I do think that perhaps being able to conquer and have fun and thrive at an in person interview is probably a green flag that you would do pretty well in a sales role.
hmm And that confidence comes through the phone later on. So when you're running a demo or you're presenting a cold call, I think that like people say it all the time, like confidence goes a long way when you're online, especially in person, but even like your confidence shines through on this call. And I feel like that's just so important in sales. And again, like you said, nervous is typically a good thing. My favorite is, if you're nervous, it means you care. And that is something I
Absolutely.
firmly believe in. So yeah, I agree.
You said something, McKenna, that I've always challenged people on is there's a genuine difference in work culture between US and Canada. What's your take?
Absolutely agree with you. I have had a leader based in the States who has been American versus Canadian. My husband works for a very large software company that is based out of the States. So different. People in the States are they like corporate, like they grind, like work is serious. Like my husband will have meetings late on Fridays, totally normal. Whereas in Canada, probably not. Like my leader in the past who was American, 24/7 working. Canadian leaders, probably not. So yeah, I would say that there is a work difference. Like how we see Europeans work culture, I believe is how Americans see Canadian work culture from my observations. I don't know if you believe that, Murtaza, but that's what I've seen.
Yeah, I do. Um, and where my head was at, that I think at a senior level, especially if you've worked all markets, you start to develop, in our role, especially in sales, targets, all that drive is there. But at an IC level or at a junior
Mhm.
level, there's just a different level of hunger. And in our
Yeah,
world,
there is.
I just see way more hungry people out there than I see here in Canada. Not that there aren't hungry people in Canada. Savannah is an example of that. Great rep. You're an example of that, right? High performing. So we have a whole bunch here too,
Mhm.
but just the proportion of hungry versus non-hungry, I think is just higher over there.
I also believe that there is a correlation perhaps between the hunger and opportunity. Like in Canada, there's just not near, there's not, let's call it space spade. There's not nearly as much opportunity in terms of just options for even companies to work for. In the States, there's so much opportunity. And I think, I'm sure we all know people who've gone to San Francisco, to New York, to LA, to Chicago for opportunities because they're just there. So perhaps there's a correlation between hunger, motivation, and grinding and the opportunity. But nonetheless, I agree with both of your points.
Well, also more opportunity means probably more applicants, which means you need to find a way to break through the noise and stand out. And so the people who want to do that are going to be hungry because they're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that they're the next one to get that job, to get that role. And
Mhm.
like in a city like New York City, I can just imagine, for example, I worked at Salesforce. When I applied for the role, there was thousands of applicants, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just one of 1,000 on that desktop when they're sorting through, and I'm sure there's an AI automation on the back end now that looks for certain things, but when you get that opportunity, you need to do everything in your power to make sure that you land that job and you do the best that you can, because if you can't do it, there's another guy next door who can.
Absolutely. And actually, Savannah, you just mentioned something that I thought of bringing up earlier is a lot of organizations today, they do have systems in place, and I get so many ads for them of softwares to do that sorting of resumes based on keywords, based on AI. And I actually think that yes, that can be efficient, but that's also an example of where I also think can hurt companies.
Totally.
And having that human in place is still important because it's about identifying that potential. And again, on a resume, you might find someone who has an amazing background, great education, but maybe they don't have the gift of the gab. Maybe they're not super motivated. Whereas there might be someone else, and there's just things that you can identify in a resume, just a general vibe where it's like, I'm gonna give this person a shot or a chance. And AI would miss that.
Yeah.
So just wanted to throw that in there as well. Because we're seeing a lot of that happen.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. I like that a lot because out of university, right, I was applying for different sales roles and there is a lot of competition, right? And so maybe, the next guy has a master's degree in business and I don't. And so on paper, he maybe look like a better candidate, but if you actually interview both of us, you never know which one's going to match your company culture, or, maybe I have more hunger than the next guy. So I think that that's really important. And there's definitely companies that are scanning their resumes using AI, but I do think that AI doesn't fully understand everything about humans. And that's kind of what we've been talking about today as a whole theme. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Murtaza, what's your take?
100% with you guys. Now, in those situations, McKenna, are you spending a lot of time building a pool of good talent and just being like, if somebody calls you up and say, "Hey, McKenna, I need a BDR, I need an AE or a sales manager," you're like, "I've got just the person for you. You don't need to spend time through like 18 different interviews."
Yeah, so I take two approaches when it comes to my own searches, and this is something that I believe sets VL Talent Collective apart. It's first and foremost, let's say I'm looking for a BDR, first place I go would be my network in the already vetted people that I have in place, considering that they are aligned to what the client's looking for. Because again, I go so deep with the discovery of the client to ensure I understand what's the culture, who succeeds here, who fails, what type of leader are you, what type of environment is it? Because I might have a really great BDR, but for example, if they don't want to be on Slack beyond 9 to 5, but the leader wants to Slack on a Saturday at 9 a.m., that's not going to be a fit. So, in addition to going into my network, Murtaza, to answer your question, I also do very selective, hand-picked search. So, I reach out to everyone myself. Yes, I'm using AI to help me identify who a good ICP would be, what type of companies I might want to reach out from in terms of their candidates. But I'm doing all that sourcing and reaching out myself based on who I believe would be a good fit. And Savannah, you mentioned something about being a new grad. I was the same. When I was a new grad, I was so motivated. I was like, I know I have so much to offer to a company, but it was so hard to get my foot in the door. I think when I graduated, I applied to like 150 different jobs, and the job I got ended up being through my network because they knew me, again, going back to human and those connections. But that said, I almost feel as though those people are really hard to find. When I was doing this BDR search recently, I was trying to find new grads and I was searching LinkedIn based on, their graduation year and if they're parts of clubs or societies or those types of things that, typically identify their interests and, type of person that they might be. But I do feel like I feel for new grads because I feel like they think it's a really hard job, but I also feel like it's hard for someone like myself, a recruiter, to find them as well. So there's almost like a gap in the market that I've identified that would be interesting to fill. So if you're looking for a job, feel free to reach out and I'll keep you on my radar.
I was gonna say, drop a message to McKenna if you're a new grad and you're looking for a job in sales, because I would trust you to help me find a job. So I'm sure other people out there should trust you too.
+1.
No, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that said, just as a disclaimer, I suppose I don't help people find jobs, but I like to be introduced and have them on my radar for if and when an opportunity comes up that they'd be well aligned to. because best believe I could spend all day working for free and helping people find jobs. And that's something I've identified early on, which I'm very flattered and honored to do and to be a help when I can. But yeah, reach out, be on my radar, and if something well aligned fits, I'd be more than happy to help.
So, McKenna, really appreciate you coming on today. I feel like I've learned so much from you in just a very short amount of time. It's valuable for me to know kind of what's going on in the back end with what talent teams are looking for when it comes to, you know, BDRs, AEs, even leadership and how we're using AI today. And I feel like there's so much noise in the AI world. So sometimes it's nice to just get a new perspective, especially someone who, you've kind of seen it all. You've gone from BDR all the way up to now running your own business. So, I hope that we can continue these conversations. We'll have to have you back on the podcast because this is super fun. And for teams who are looking to, get some revenue generating, amazing talent, just like McKenna used to be, I think that, she's an amazing person to get in touch with. And, we really appreciate the time today.
Yeah, game knows game, right? And I've seen that firsthand with McKenna, having being able to source great sales talent. So I can vouch for that. Thanks for your help, McKenna, and wonderful having you on this episode of Bendercast.
Yeah, well, thank you so much to you both for having me. And some closing words. If you are looking to get into sales and that's why you're listening today, just know that working hard and being motivated and showing your personality will take you so far. That will never go out of style, regardless of what happens with AI. Continue to self-educate and just, continue to learn. And then on the client side, if you're looking for really great candidates, just always take the time to get to know them as a person, because that always goes a really long way. And then also make sure they're using AI properly and, adequately. But no, thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you both today, and it's been great.
Awesome. See you next time.